Hello again. We will continue our readings from chapter 9 of the book, What is Man, Adam, Alien, or Ape? Somebody asked who wrote the book, and I want to make it clear that it is my own book that I'm reading from. Now, earlier in this chapter, I introduced a make-believe picture, or analogy as I called it, in which I pictured the brain of a human being as a house, and the mind of that human being as the occupant of the house. That house had a number of features, one of which in particular was an array of machinery in the basement of the house, which automatically, without any conscious effort on your part, automatically looks after the functions of the human body, pictured in the analogy by the gardens of the house. We then went a step further and asked a number of realtors or estate agents to come and value this imaginary house. And 3 particular realtors came along, and we've considered what happened with the first 2. We now come to the 3rd realtor, and I need to point out again that the realtors are pictures of the various theories of consciousness, human consciousness, that are on offer today. So remember that the realtor is in fact representing a theory of human consciousness. Now, before I move on, I would like to point out that due to the recommendation by YouTube of that last episode, the YouTube views went through the roof, and there have been over 7,400 views. Now, YouTube views don't, in fact, mean a great deal, but you can go further into the analysis and discover that 10% of those viewers were still watching the video by the time it came to an end, which means that over 700 people watched the video episode all the way through. Well, now that's not going to be repeated. It was a special recommendation by YouTube to their vast number of readers and listeners. But nevertheless, it was a great encouragement, and I'm grateful for those people who kindly signed up as subscribers to my YouTube channel, because they will be receiving notification of this issue and future issues. Well, now, let me turn to the reading itself. We're starting with a subheading, which is Realtor number 3. What is it like to be a bat? Explanations will follow. Your third valuer obviously subscribed to Haldane's conclusion, cited in our chapter head quotation. Quotes, "I am compelled to believe that mind is not wholly conditioned by matter." Close quotes. The things that make you a self-aware person having a continuous existence things like your thoughts, personality, spirit, and memories, desires, ambitions, emotions, and free will are more than the unalterable and fatalistic output of your genes and neurons. In other words, Realtor 3 teaches that dualism, the belief that mind and physical brain are different and distinct, best describes the relationship between consciousness and brain, in spite of the fact that it creates what is often called the hard problem. This is described in New Scientist magazine as follows, quotes, "At its heart is what philosopher David Chalmers in New York University termed the hard problem of consciousness. How can physical networks of neurons produce experiences that appear to fall outside the material world?" As Thomas Nagel, also at New York University, puts it in the 1970s, you could know every detail of the physical workings of a bat's brain, but still not know what it is like to be a bat. Close quotes. Two dualistic answers can be offered to the hard problem. Firstly, some argue that as brains evolved and became incredibly complex machines, something having a decidedly non-material nature emerged from the machine. And this something was not just a helpless ghost, but a mind capable of controlling the machine, at least to some extent. This is the system, the answer, offered by Raymond Tallis, whose intriguing book, Aping Mankind, we met in Chapter 1. He proposes that the evolution of the opposable thumb in an ape of some kind led to such a forward leap in dexterity that the brain of the ape-like creature underwent an evolutionary surge, causing the emergence of mind from the physical brain and producing man as a unique kind of animal capable of controlling its own destiny. Reverting for a moment to the analogy, this is like saying that your house, the brain, built itself by the random accumulation of timber, bricks, and glass, and then somehow accidentally created an intelligent architect who took over the management of its construction. Silly as this may seem, it lies at the heart of the emergent mind thesis, which also predicts that computers will one day become intelligent in their own right and presumably discover what it's like to be a bat. That should be what it's like to be a computer. There is an amusing irony in this idea. We shall see presently that one of the strongest arguments used against dualism is that a non-physical entity such as mind could have no influence on a physical object like the brain. Why not? Because by definition, mind lacks physical properties, such as mass or energy, and cannot therefore interact with a material object like the brain. Yet those who reject dualism are often the very same people who claim that non-physical mind must have emerged in some way from the physical brain. In the analogy, the architect is spawned by the house and completes his redesign, transforming it from ape accommodation to human habitation. He then steps outside to admire his work, forgets to take the key, and locks himself out, leaving the house without an occupant. The mind-brain interface can be an open door, but it cannot logically be a one-way turnstile. The second and alternative dualistic view is that man was equipped from the outset with both a material body, including a physical brain, and a non-material mind. He differs from all animals by virtue of having originated as a thinking, self-aware, and moral creature. This, of course, is the biblical view of man, and we shall address it in part 3 of this book. In what remains of this chapter, we'll confine ourselves to examining dualism and its implications. Let's begin by recognizing that even non-emergent dualism comes in 2 different versions. And then we come to a subheading Aristotle and the snowball. What is the connection between Aristotle and a snowball? Answer: hylomorphism. What's that? It's a Greek compound word meaning literally matter/form. Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived between 384 and 322 before Christ, taught that all physical objects have 2 basic properties, namely matter, the stuff of which they are made, and form, the way they look or are shaped. This includes such things as color, texture, and flavor. The snowball is a perfect example of hylomorphism. Being made of snow, its matter, and shaped like a ball, its form. By calling it a snowball, therefore, we spell out its hylomorphic nature explicitly. Aristotle himself, who probably never saw a snowball, illustrated his theory by a lump of wax and applied it to the mind-body problem in man. Michael Egnor explains, quotation, "Human beings are composites of soul and body, integrated form and matter, like, in Aristotle's phrase, the shape of wax and the matter of the wax. They are just different aspects of one thing, the wax itself. These scholastics didn't believe there was a hard problem." Close quote. Egnor believes that by returning to hylomorphic dualism, we could explain consciousness in a very straightforward way. But I'm not so sure. I think there are major problems with this view of consciousness and mind. Firstly, Aristotle's theory applied only to physical objects in space and time, like snowballs and wax candles. On what grounds can we justify its transfer to living creatures, and specifically to man? How can my non-material self or mind become the form of my physical brain, so as to integrate my soul and body into a single entity? It's easy to see how snow or wax can be formed into different shapes without changing the substance being molded. But no such relationship exists between the stuff of the human brain and the form of the human mind. It is okay to claim that body and mind are simply different aspects of a unitary being, but we knew that already. The hylomorphic concept sheds no light on the hard problem of how these two aspects of the human person are related and interact. In this context, hylomorphism is merely an assertion, not an explanation. Secondly, the hylomorphic concept handcuffs mind and body together in a way that no theist can logically accept. Going back to the analogy, it means that you, the mind, who occupy the house, which is the brain, are simply part of the furniture. According to materialism, you either don't exist at all, or else you are purely decorative or powerless. Aristotle certainly improves on that, but it leaves our mind as part of the fabric of the house, rather like the basement machinery. It may be that the mind is a different kind of machine from those that pump the blood and digest the food. We could, for example, liken the mind to an electrical system which controls the mechanical machinery which perform such basic tasks. But can that be all? If so, the mind would be just as controlled by our physical genes and brain cells as the physical parts of our body. Furthermore, any distinction between man and other animals would be lost, and dualism would fall and fail, as many think it does. Most seriously of all, the idea that minds are merely a non-material aspect of our integrated persons means that the mind cannot exist without a body, although a body can theoretically exist without a mind producing a zombie. But a theist is one who believes that God himself is a spirit, possessing mind, but not possessing any physical form or constituent. If God exists, then mind can exist without being joined to a body. Furthermore, Christian theists also believe that since man is made in the image of God, our human minds continue to exist when our bodies die. As the Apostle Paul declares, quotes, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord," close quote. Clearly, biblical Christianity requires that our non-material minds are capable of existing apart from our physical bodies, and hylomorphic dualism doesn't offer that option. Subheading: Substance Dualism. Fortunately, there is another kind of dualism based on the teaching of French philosopher René Descartes, 1596 to 1650, and known as substance dualism. It is fair to say that most philosophers either reject it outright or view it with suspicion. But several respected authorities have recently rallied to its support, including J.P. Moreland and Keith Ward. The latter writes as follows, quotes, "Dualism, the original sin of Descartes, is not yet dead. Dualists can be found hiding in the philosophical undergrowth, slightly cowed perhaps, but still defiant. The heart of dualism, in the sense relevant to this discussion, is that mind and matter are two distinct sorts of things. Minds do not exist in space, whereas matter is defined in terms of its location and extent in space. Minds think, feel, and perceive, and matter does not." Close quotes. Brackets, the reference to original sin at the beginning of this quotation is, of course, a joke. Both Tallis and Ward, among many others, point out that what are often called qualia, a technical term derived from the word qualities, exist only insofar as they are experienced by conscious minds. These qualia include such familiar things as pleasure, pain, sadness, and emotions in general, together with the perception of sounds, colours, tastes, odours, and other things, detected by the physical senses, but only experienced in the mind. Besides qualia, there are other categories of mental activity that are clearly non-material. Firstly, there are abstract concepts accessible to our minds, such as shapes, numbers, and mathematical operations. These can, of course, be copied down on paper or some other medium, thus seeming to be material objects. But they don't have to be written down. They can be thought up and manipulated entirely in the mental realm. They are essentially non-material, occupying neither space nor time. Finally, there is the human capacity to imagine things, whether they exist materially or don't exist at all. In material terms, we can build castles out of stone or sand, but mentally we can build castles in the air. This ability to think about things, whether or not we are currently experiencing them, or even if they don't actually exist, is sometimes called intentionality. Finally, the awareness of ourselves as persons enjoying continuity over time and distinct from other human persons is a non-physical mental experience. Unlike qualia, which are transient, self-awareness tells us that our childhood memories and lifetime histories were just as much ours as our current experience of reading this book. Although we age and change with the passing years, the healthy mind has a sense of continuing identity, the belief that it belongs to a single, enduring person. Keith Ward argues that even if such a mind had emerged from a complex physical brain, the fact of its emergence would necessarily make it something composed of non-material stuff, a different kind of substance from the physical substance that makes up our brains and bodies. Emergence implies, he adds, quote, that minds are different from matter. They could in principle be decoupled from matter, close quotes. Quote continued. We have already seen, of course, that the idea of mind emerging from brain actually offers no explanation of the relationship between the two. But even if it were true, it would do nothing to solve the hard problem. But in spite of these fairly obvious reasons for treating mind and matter as two different things or substances, vociferous objections are raised against substance dualism. I'll deal with the three strongest arguments in the next podcast.